recording now. All right, so week 3, let's scroll down here. Week 3. All right, so as you guys have probably noticed, there are a lot of assignments that you have to look over every week. And I think it was originally broken down this way so that it would be a little bit easier to navigate for you, but I think it ended up being just too much. So I know I talked about that in the video last week, but try not to get overwhelmed by the number of assignments. Look at the ones that are graded. Those are the ones where you're actually turning something in. The rest of them you need to do, and you need to watch all the videos. Especially for this week, we start going over DOM, which hopefully from some of the videos and things, I don't know if you guys have watched them already, but it's going to be when you actually start manipulating the HTML elements. So that's what we're doing this week. So like in the dual, rather than just opening up the JavaScript console and watching the JavaScript console change every time you fight, now you're actually seeing something in your HTML. So if you notice here, every time I hit fight, it's still coming up as a console log, but it's also changing the round number. It's changing the score each time. And once somebody wins, this button changes to done. So that's kind of what you guys are trying to do for this week in terms of the dual. Last week, you were just working on getting it to, you were adding in the array. So you were using an array of information for each player rather than having it all separated out into each, 100 different variables. So that was last week. And then this week, you want to try working with the DOM manipulation. And this is pretty much it for the dual. Like you want to get the DOM to show up, and then that's pretty much the goal for this assignment. You won't see this one again for week 4. Same thing for the buggy search. So buggy search last week, you guys needed to try to have 50% of the errors found. And I know they can be a little bit tricky. The assignment, I had a couple people that didn't thoroughly watch this assignment, but week 2 activity practice, debug techniques. So this one goes over some really good debugging techniques and actually shows you some examples, and should help you find quite a few of the errors. And then in the video for week 2 from the meeting last week, I showed some examples of where a lot of these errors are. So for week 3, what you're trying to do, so you should have had this coming up already. So your search query is too small, try again. So what you're trying to get now is you want the actual results to show up. So there are, in the instructions, it talks about how many errors there actually are. I think there's around 14 errors total. But you can, and that the 14 doesn't include some of the really minor like spelling errors. Those are like the major ones that you need to actually have everything functioning. So I have a couple examples pulled up. And before we go to that, did you guys have any questions about last week or what's due this week? I know the instructions have been a little bit confusing. There's a lot of information there. And that is something that I'm going to be changing. So this class has, you've probably seen from the videos, you've got one person's voice in the video, and then you've got somebody else whose site you're looking at for quizzes, and then I'm teaching the class this month. So I'm sure that might be a little bit overwhelming or confusing. But this class there's a lot of different people that have taught it over the last few months, and we are working to just really streamline the course. And I know right now it still seems like a lot of information, but we're working on it. It's getting condensed and trying to be streamlined a bit. But definitely open to suggestions. I've had a couple students that have suggested a couple things or told me what would work for them. And I'm always very open to hearing those suggestions. And yeah, just any questions. So I only have two of you on here. We have a pretty big class this month. But do either of you have any questions? Okay, so how you can tell that 50% has been debugged, if it's the first 50%, let me refresh this. You'll have, if you type in just 2 letters, or even less than 2 letters, you'll get this message that pops up that says your search query is too small, try again. If you have debugged the first half, you'll get that message, but you will not get actual results. So that's a good indicator. I'll look when I'm grading it, and they will be graded tomorrow. When I'm grading, I don't just check to see if that's the message that comes up. I also look at the actual errors that you've debugged. So let's say that you found 4 or 5 in the first half and then 2 or 3 in the last half. So you're not getting that error message to pop up, but you have technically fixed half the errors. You would still get full credit. So I actually look at the code. So let me pull this up real quick. So here in the search, this is just an example from a former student. And you can see she put in a lot of pseudocode and a lot of comments. But so I know where each of the errors is. So I kind of scroll through and I'm like, oh, did they catch that one? Did they catch this one? So I just try to kind of scroll through quickly and see what errors you've fixed. And occasionally I find somebody who fixed errors that weren't broken. So try to be careful of that. You know, when you find something that says like the next 4 lines are correct, don't fix anything. So like here, do not fix the line directly below. You know, make sure you don't fix things like that. And Googling or using W3 schools is a great way to kind of double check. You know, there's things like camel casing, logical errors. There are, you know, in this particular instance, she has everything fixed, but there is this validate. So in this, most people fixed it to where it says validate. It doesn't have the Q anymore. So this is one of the ones I was talking about that it is an error, and hopefully like you would fix it so it says validate. And then when you use the variable below, it'll say validate. But as long as it uses the Q both times, it would still work. So that's one of those errors. It's not counted as one of the like major 14 errors, but it's there. So looking for like number of equal signs is a big one. Camel casing is a big one. Closing curly brackets I would say the majority of them are either camel casing or brackets that are missing. And while it isn't necessary to always have the semicolon after all of the brackets that are used, that is not one of the errors. So I'll just let you know that. You don't need to fix anywhere that there is or is not a semicolon. So that's not one of the errors. Brackets, yes, missing brackets is a common error, but where you have the semicolon, just because it's not mandatory to be there doesn't mean that that's going to be something that would break your code. That's more of like a stylistic or like personal thing, is some people use this extra semicolon after all of their sections, like after all of their functions or all of their loops, where really you only need it after certain functions. You only need it after your anonymous functions. Does that answer your question? And I know it's a little confusing to figure out, all right, if I fixed exactly 50%. If you're getting that error message to pop up that says your query is too small, then you're definitely good to go with the 50% debugged. great. And if that's not popping up, as long as you have fixed, I'd say 7 to 10 errors, you're good to go, even if you're not getting that message popped up. So, because I will definitely be going through and checking all of them. So, any other questions? Okay. I know the instructions have been a little bit confusing. I thought we'd have more people log on tonight because I've had several students ask me for one-on-one time or ask me when we were going to have a live session because they wanted to ask questions. Don't stress it. If you guys have other questions that come up, just message me. I've been leaving chat on as much as I can. And also I'm available on email or FSO messaging pretty much all the time. I mean, I check my email very frequently. So if you have a question that pops up on there, shoot me an email or ask me a question anytime you want. Let's see. Let's switch over to our other assignment. So for the DOM manipulation, do you guys have, have you had a chance to look over some of the assignments for that so far? It can be a little bit confusing. But you're basically going to be looking at anywhere before that you were having an alert, you now want that to be displaying on your HTML. So one of the biggest suggestions I can give is going to be just to keep it really simple and break it down. Like, don't try to put don't declare your variables and then set all the DOM manipulation all into one thing. Like, you can still set a variable for like your button and then add the function to the button in another line of code. Kind of break it down, simplify it as much as you can for yourselves. You don't have to put everything in one chunk of code. You can kind of break it down. There's a couple ways to do things, such as your buttons. So for the button, you can use either a get element by ID, or you can use query selector, for all of these things. One of the common errors that I see people make, let's say that I have get element by ID, and then right here I have a name that doesn't actually exist in my HTML. So this get element by ID, make sure that what you have here actually matches exactly the actual ID name in your HTML and your CSS, or else it's not going to work. For query selector, so same kind of thing. If I'm using get element by ID, I know it's an ID, so I don't need that pound sign here. If I'm using query selector, it could be any type of HTML. So I would need to have like the pound or the dot or just the HTML tag. So you can use that for a lot of different things. But yeah, with this, try to keep it as simple as you can. Do one section at a time. Don't go crazy with it and try to do it all at once. There are a lot of examples and a bunch of different videos you guys can watch. And if you get stuck, ask me. Don't wait until the night before at 11:30 p.m. and then say, this just isn't working for me. I don't know what I'm doing. It's not working. Ask me ahead of time. This one is a little bit more complicated than the search. Buggy search, just, keep working on it. Query selector will work with any type of HTML. So yeah, you can use it, right here you can see where it's working with just an H tag. So you have your H2, here it's working with an ID. So query selector can work with any type of HTML. But I don't know, try a couple different things, see what you like better. You can see here in some instances you're using query selector, some instances you're using get element by ID. You can also look like here, fighter2 text. So your document.query selector Leo dot query selector P. So here you're selecting all of the paragraph tags within the ID of Leo. Here you're selecting all the paragraph tags within the query selector of Dawn. So you can kind of break it down almost like you do in CSS. You know, you guys can get to, if you wanted to change all of the paragraph tags in Leo, this is kind of how you would do it in CSS, except that it would be written out a little bit differently, right? But it's the same premise, same concept. Remember, when you're working with your button, you want to call your button. So set a variable for your button first, and you want to call that element. So in this case, the button is called fight_btn, and then you want to add your event listener. Doing the dot add event listener, I think, is a little bit easier for people than the click event. So when you're watching the videos, you will see that there's a couple different ways to do buttons. You can do one like this, button.addEventListener, or you can do a button which is equal to a click event, which is equal to a function, which is essentially doing the same thing as this, except this, I think, is a little bit simpler way to do it when you're new to it. So the button.addEventListener, it's a click, and then it's going to run a function called fight, and then your default is false. So you want the default action of the button to be false until someone clicks it, and then it runs the actual event. So all of this is in the documentation you guys have for this week. It's in the videos, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Excuse me, that the event listener seems to work a little bit better. Most of my students that use the dot add event listener rather than the click event seem to have a better time with this. So just FYI. And then just kind of, you know, simplify it as much as you can. Think about which elements are going to need to start accessing the HTML. So, you know, the text that's going to display pretty much everywhere that there was an alert before is going to need to access the HTML. And you guys already have everywhere on this HTML document, everywhere that you need to display something already exists. So now you need to just make this JavaScript, rather than popping up in an alert box, it needs to display in that particular place in your HTML. So that's kind of a good way to approach it, you know, and play around with it. And just ask me if you get stuck or you have a question. Any questions right now? Another good place, if button clicks get a little bit confusing for you, if you go into JavaScript events, you can look at some more information here. So here's what I was talking about, the button on click. So that's the on click event rather than the add event listener. And if you go in and you test this stuff out, you know, you can see what it does. You can try each one out. Let's find. But W3 Schools is a great place for you guys to work. So here's HTML DOM. Let's go into DOM events. So here's where you'll get the, there's the on click. And this should have an event listener on here as well. Of course, it's going to make a liar out of me. Oh, there was one right here. There's mouse events. We're looking for click events. Could have sworn there was one that was not an on click, but it's an event listener right here. Well, at any rate, the example, you guys have both examples that you can look at in the videos. There we go. Sorry. Events, event listener. So here's the event listener. So that's when I was saying just students in general tend to have a little bit more success with it for whatever reason. But check them both out. And this is a really good place to just kind of reference the code, try some things out. You know, just make sure that your like your function name or your button name, you know, those kind of things, that they all match up. that your IDs, your query selectors with your HTML elements, all of that stuff, make sure that it actually matches what's in your HTML. Any other questions? My whole 2 students? Is there a reason it's called Event Listener? Yes, it is called Event Listener because essentially the element is sitting there listening for the event to happen. So it's kind of like a really literal name. It's waiting. It's waiting for the button to be clicked. And once the button is clicked, it runs your function, which would be the result of the event. So it's kind of the same thing. But yeah, so it's listening, it's waiting for something to happen, which is why it's an event listener. Any other questions? It could be, about something you guys are doing this week or about just something in general with the class, anything that you had questions about. Let's look at our week 3 stuff real quick here. The other thing that you guys need to make sure that you do this week is the research topic, which a couple people have turned it in already. So the research topic is going to be what you're going to write your final research paper on. So week 4, the graded assignments are a homework assignment, which we'll talk about this next week too. But with this one, analyze objects.person, which you will see next week. It'll be open. This one is going to be analyzing code and only finishing the analyze and design portion. So again, like some of the assignments you've already had, when you see this one, you are going to be just writing pseudocode for it, and you're not provided any code to start, unlike some of the week 1 assignments. This one, I just want to see that you could explain what's going to happen. You aren't necessarily required to write all the code out, but you're going to be required to explain what happens. And then the research project is due, which is just a paper. You are going to be required to have references. So that's what's due this week is the topic. So it's going to be 25 words just describing what you want to do for the research paper. And it's going to be anything related to JavaScript. So anything like more advanced, something we're not covering in this class, or something expanding on what you guys are doing in this class. So that's what you're doing for the research topic. And if you go in there, it has some examples. A lot of people just talk about jQuery, anything that's going to be like a little bit more advanced than what we're doing in here. The dual part 3, we discussed, that's where it's going to manipulate the DOM elements. So you're actually going to see, these things change every time I hit fight. You're going to see the scores change. You're going to see what round you're on. So you can see the round is changing. When you get to done, the button changes to done. So that kind of stuff is in Dual 3. You're just manipulating the HTML. Back over here. Ooh, excuse me. For the debug search version 3, this is going to be 100% of your elements are fixed. So it's going to give you, we already talked about this. It's going to give you, if I put too few letters in, you're going to get this. And then if I search for something more than that, it's either going to say no results found, or if I search for something that's included, it's going to actually give you results. So these links don't have to work. All you're looking for is the results would actually pop up. Let's see, what else for week 3? Your midterm exam is due later this week. In the midterm, like your quizzes, is just going to be a multiple choice where you're going to give me the screenshot of your score. The midterm, there is a practical option where you could do a practical. That's completely up to you. I've been teaching this class for this is the 3rd month, and I haven't had anyone do the practical for the midterm yet. I have had a few students do the practical for the final, which is great. But for the midterm, I mean, most people just do the multiple choice, true, false kind of deal, and then turn that in. So, and that's fine. And you'll see that like the quizzes, it's on Felicia's website, who was the instructor I took over from. And she was still in the process of trying to really get this class running smoothly, when it fell into my lap, and then I'm kind of starting from scratch again. So the class is a work in progress. And I know that's been frustrating. The two of you I haven't really heard from that much this month. But I've had a few students that have been a little bit frustrated with the number of assignments and the amount of instructions. And I know it's a lot. I know. And I am very lenient on, if you contact me and you have any issues, it's totally fine. Just keep me posted. Let me know what's going on. Let's see. We are not going to do anything with jQuery this month, so that was a question. Your research, I have a few students every month that do the research topic on jQuery. You guys will definitely get into jQuery in some future classes. And jQuery, it builds up everything you're learning now. Like you need to know the basics, it's baby steps, and then you'll get there. Some of jQuery is simpler than what you guys are going to do now, but it's better that you understand the full concept before you start using the shortcut. So you'll get there. But jQuery, pretty much everything, it's steps, it's progression. We're gradually getting you to some of these more advanced topics. And once you get to some of the more advanced topics, you might be like, why did I ever have to learn anything came before this? Or, why did I have to do this? Or why did I have to do that? But in the end, it's going to help you understand the concept rather than just like how to do it. Let's scroll down here real quick. So because of the amount of material covered in this class, there's a few things listed here. So you see final challenge, practice Canvas, library. Canvas and libraries are something that we're not really going to get into this month. These are optional videos and some activities that you guys can do if you want. They're not required. They're not graded. They would be awesome for you to do. If nothing else, I would highly suggest that you at least like look over them or watch the videos if you have time, or hold on to them, like download the information or watch the videos or save the videos for the future, because you guys are going to get into this stuff in some of your other classes. You have another class after this, and then you're going to have PWA1, and then a few of your future classes are going to use these skills. So even though we don't have a chance to like really get into it, these assignments are there for you to look over. So starting next week, there's the course load for next week is not huge. So you guys have options for your final. You can do the true false final exam, or you can do the practical. You have the research project, which is just writing up an essay essentially on a more advanced topic, and then you have some pseudocode. So next week is not real heavy. So if you can, look over these. Canvas and working with libraries is going to be beneficial to you, and it's going to help you at least kind of know what someone's talking about when you get into some of those upcoming classes. Let's see. I think that's it for week 3. Showed you guys an example of what you're supposed to do for the assignment. You saw briefly even an example of the code. Whew, sorry, a little tired tonight. Do either of you have any other questions? Okay. Nothing wrong with that. If you don't have any other questions, then, with the whole 2 of you on here tonight, we might finish up early. And as you're working on the dual and the debugging, if you get stuck, if you guys are more than welcome to copy and paste code and send it to me anytime. If you wanted to, even when I'm on chat, even if I'm not available to like screen share, you can always show me snippets of code. You can take screenshots. You can just tell me like, hey, this is happening and I don't know where to go from here. Anything like that, let me know. I'm here to help. I know that this class has a lot of information. It's a lot of new information. But just let me know when you're stuck. Don't get frustrated. Tell me. I'm here for you. All right. Well, if we don't have any other additional questions, then we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up.